Hey everybody, MS Farzan here, and in this video we're going to discuss how to write plot. This could be if you're writing a fantasy novel or any type of novel, or it could be if you're designing a campaign for, let's say, a Dungeons & Dragons game. A lot of the same things hold true for any type of novel and for any type of role-playing game. And we're going to talk about two key concepts when you're thinking about deciding how to design your plot. The first thing to be aware of is that plot has an arc. Your plot is basically the storyline for your novel or for your adventure, and it starts at point A and it goes to point B. This holds true for most types of plot. It's actually a very simple process. For example, The Lord of the Rings, one of my very favorite series, and spoiler alert for the two people who have not seen the movies or read the books. If we distill the plot of The Lord of the Rings to 2 points, we have one point, point A, where there's a hobbit who has a ring, and we have the second point, point B, where the hobbit has deposited the ring in Mount Doom and saved Middle-earth. Not very interesting when you put it that way, and obviously the books have quite a lot more depth than that, but it wouldn't be very interesting if Frodo had the ring and walked over to Mount Doom and just plopped it in there and then saved the day. That's like basically one sentence. What's interesting is what happens between point A and point B, and that's the storyline or the plot of the book. That's the narrative that is told sweepingly over 3 novels with a lot of stuff that happens in between, and that's called the plot arc. Everything that happens between point A and point B. So when you're writing a novel or if you're creating an adventure, think of those 2 points. Where does the group or the main character or the protagonist start? And where do they end at the end of the book or at the end of the series or at the end of the adventure? What happens in between is the plot arc, and that's where things get interesting. Your characters could take a lot of detours moving this way and that way, or there could be some sort of intrigue. Will they or won't they? Who shot who killed who fell in love with who fell out of love with whom? And that's what makes the story interesting, is all of the different things that happen in between point A and point B. But point A and point B are relatively simple. And here's the kicker. What makes a plot believable is if everything that happens along the plot arc is in service of getting the readers from point A to point B. You can have diversions, you can have wonderful sweeping descriptions of different locations that really draw the reader into your world and set a tone and set kind of a space for all of the fiction that you're writing. But what's important is that all of this has to be in service to the plot so that the reader remembers why they're reading the book and doesn't want to put it down because they see all of the hooks, even if it is just that they're learning about the world or they're learning about the politics or they're learning about the magic system or the characters. They're consciously or subconsciously being pulled along this line towards point B, even if they don't know what point B or where point B is at this point, rather than feeling lost or really not having an idea where the story is going. That's how you write a convincing plot that not only keeps the readers engaged, but has a sense of consistency because you know where the story is going, even if you don't know how it's going to end. Now, there's obviously another side of this, and that side is comprised of characters. Just as everything in your novel should be in service of moving the plot arc from point A to point B, your plot should always be in service of your characters and not the other way around. It's easy to think of your characters as pieces on a chessboard that you move around so that you can advance the plot forward, but it really doesn't work like that if you want your readers to believe all of the things that your characters are doing. Your plot should be driven forward by character motivations and by the things that happen to them. I think we've all come across this in storytelling where we've read something and something happens in service of the plot that doesn't seem to be natural for whatever the character has shown us up to that point. And that's when we say something that someone did something out of character. That happens quite a bit when we have something that we want to happen with the plot to move it from point A to point B, and we can't think of a better way of doing it than just have the character maybe change their stripes a little bit. That's very disingenuous, and it really takes the reader out of the experience and out of the immersion that you've created for them by building out that world. If you're at a point struggling to move the plot forward, think about what are your characters doing and what would they do in whatever situation they're put in. Either your characters will tell you that they're not the right people to move that plot point forward and you need someone else to do it or something else to do it, or you'll learn that maybe that plot isn't right for those characters and you'll have to rework the plot so that point A and point B look a little bit different than when you first planned them out. There's nothing wrong with doing that, and it will make your story feel more natural and draw the readers in for more. One specific point on complexity, specifically if you're running an adventure and not writing a novel. if you're running an adventure for something like a Dungeons & Dragons campaign, you're going to want to keep it simple compared to the types of plot that you would write for a novel, specifically for like a mystery series or something with a lot of political intrigue. Those types of things are really cool in a novel setting because you have a lot of time to write about it and really bring the readers in. But if you have a bunch of players around you that you're writing plot for, you're going to find it difficult to keep all of the characters in place and all of the players involved in each one of those points of political intrigue. You can still have a complex political system and maybe have some political machinations by some of the non-player characters that the player characters can get involved in. But compared to a novel, you really don't have a lot of space in a Dungeons & Dragons campaign or something similar to build out that intrigue without your players getting bored. You'll probably be talking to yourself for quite a lot of time, and if you keep it simple with a few plot twists and turns, you'll be able to bring everybody in a lot more naturally than trying to force them to play out this really long type of intrigue that might take days and days to establish. Don't get me wrong, some parties might be totally okay with that, but by and large, if you keep it simple, you'll have a campaign that feels tight, well organized, and really fun to play in. For more information about characters and plot, check out Anne Lamont's Bird by Bird. I find it to be a helpful resource for all types of writing. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Twitter for more crunchy content.